March 1945, Germany. An American soldier was dying in a ditch. His unit had moved on. They thought he was dead. Maybe they were right. He had been hit in the chest during the advance. He had made it off the road. He had crawled into a ditch and stopped moving because moving hurt too much. The bleeding was slowing down. So was everything else. He lay there in the cold and he waited to find out which way it was going to go. Then he heard footsteps. He turned his head. A German soldier was standing at the edge of the ditch looking down at him. Hands empty, no rifle. The German looked at him for a moment. Then he climbed down into the ditch. He opened the American's jacket. He looked at the wound. He tore strips from his own uniform and packed it as well as he could. He had no medical training. He did it anyway. Then he climbed back out. He walked to the road. He flagged down the next American vehicle he saw. He stood in the middle of the road with his hands in the air until it stopped. The American soldiers got out with their weapons up. The German pointed back at the ditch. He didn't speak English. He just pointed. The American soldiers found their man. He was alive. 3 weeks later, the report reached Patton. He read it. Then he put down everything he was doing. And he went to find the German soldier. Before we get into what happened next, if you want more untold stories from World War II, hit that subscribe button. It was March 19th, 1945, 7 weeks before Germany's surrender. The Third Army was moving fast through central Germany. The front was fluid, which meant that men sometimes got left behind, not through carelessness, through the mathematics of fast warfare. You move, you fight, you move again. You account for who you can account for. Sometimes someone is in a ditch on the wrong side of where the line has moved to, and nobody knows until later. Private First Class Robert Tanner was 22 years old, from Georgia. He had been in Europe for 9 months. He was part of a rifle company pushing through a village outside Kassel when the firefight started, and he took a round in the upper chest. He went down. His platoon was already moving through the far side of the village. In the noise and movement and smoke, nobody saw him fall. He crawled to the drainage ditch at the edge of the road. It took a long time. He got in and put both hands on the wound, and he lay there in the cold mud and breathed as slowly as he could manage. He had heard somewhere that slow breathing helped. He was trying everything that seemed to help. He didn't know how much time passed. He heard movement on the road above him, and he went still. The fighting had moved on. He didn't know which direction, which meant he didn't know if what he was hearing was American or German. He turned his head. A German soldier was standing at the edge of the ditch, young, maybe 20 years old. Wehrmacht infantry. His rifle was not in his hands. He held nothing. He looked at Tanner. Tanner looked at him. Neither of them spoke. There was nothing to say in any language that would have covered the situation adequately. The German climbed down into the ditch. He moved carefully, the way you move around someone who is hurt. He crouched beside Tanner and opened his jacket and looked at the wound. It was serious. Tanner could tell that from the German's expression, which said what the situation actually was without softening it. The German reached into his own coat and tore cloth from the lining. Then he tore strips from the bottom of his own shirt. He packed the wound with the cloth and held pressure on it, and kept holding it for several minutes without speaking. Tanner watched him work. He didn't say anything either. The German checked the wound one more time. Then he stood up and climbed back out of the ditch. He walked to the road. He stood in the middle of it. The jeep that came around the bend contained 4 American soldiers from a supply unit. They saw the German standing in the road and stopped fast. They got out with their weapons up. The German stood with his hands raised. He didn't move toward them. He didn't speak. He just turned his body toward the ditch and pointed. One of the Americans moved cautiously toward where he was pointing. He looked down into the ditch. He looked back at the others. "There's one of ours down here." Tanner was pulled out and loaded into the jeep. The German was taken into custody. He was processed through the standard prisoner system, and the detail about what he had done, the wound treatment, the flagging of the vehicle, was noted in the intake report by the processing officer as unusual. That notation made its way through channels until it reached Patton's headquarters 3 weeks later. His aide, Colonel Thomas Reed, flagged it immediately and placed it on the desk with a single note attached. "You should read this one." Patton read it before his morning briefing on April 9th. He read it twice. He set it down and sat with it the way he sat with things that required thought. Then he looked at Reed. "Where is Tanner now?" "Field hospital outside Frankfurt, sir, recovering." expected to make it. And the German POW processing camp outside Marburg, sir. Patton stood up. Get me a car. They drove to the processing camp that morning. Patton had not told anyone what he intended to do when he got there. He told Reed only where they were going. The German soldier's name was Franz Huber, 20 years old, from a small Feyerwerk 20 years old town in Bavaria. He had been conscripted into the Wehrmacht 8 months earlier. He had no real combat experience before the final collapse of the German line in the west. He had been captured 2 days after the incident. With Tanner, separated from his unit and surrounded, he was in a holding area with 40 other prisoners when the guards told him a senior American officer wanted to speak with him. He walked into the meeting room, not knowing what to expect. Patton was already there. Huber stood at attention. He was 20 years old and standing in front of a 4-star American general, and he had no framework for what this was. Patton told him to sit down. Huber sat. Patton looked at him for a moment. 20 years old, sitting across a table from a 4-star general, in a room he had never expected to be in. Then Patton spoke, with Reed translating. You found an American soldier in a ditch, Patton said. He was wounded. You treated him with what you had. Then you stood in the middle of a road and flagged down an American vehicle to get him help. You were taken prisoner 2 days later. Huber confirmed this was accurate. I want to ask you something, Patton said, and I want an honest answer. Why did you do it? Huber thought about it for a moment. He was dying, Huber said through Reed. There was no one else there. Patton looked at him. That's the whole reason? Yes, sir. Patton was quiet for a moment. Then he said what he had driven 2 hours to say. I've been in 2 wars, Patton said. I've seen what men do to each other. In them. Most of it I understand, even when I don't approve of it. What you did I want you to know I don't take for granted. He leaned forward slightly. You were an enemy soldier. He was an enemy soldier to you. You were both in the middle of a war that was almost over, but wasn't over yet. And you climbed into a ditch and used your own clothing to treat his wound, and then you put yourself at risk to get him help. You had no obligation to do any of it. No order told you to. Nobody was watching. He looked at Huber directly. That matters, not because it changes the war or because it changes the outcome of anything, but because it is the kind of thing that should be acknowledged when it happens. And I am acknowledging it. Huber didn't say anything. He was 20 years old, and he was not prepared for this conversation. Patton stood up. You'll be treated according to the Geneva Convention. You'll go home when this is over. But I wanted you to hear this from someone who could say it with some authority. What you did was right, and it will be in the record. He nodded once and walked out. Private Tanner recovered fully. He was discharged in the autumn of 1945, returned to Georgia. He spent the rest of his working life as a mechanic. He had 4 children. He tracked down Huber's name through military records in the 1950s and wrote him a letter. It took 3 attempts to find the right address. Huber wrote back. They exchanged letters for 11 years. Tanner died in 1981. They never met. In person, the distance and complications of 2 men from opposite sides of a war trying to arrange a meeting never resolved into an actual trip. The letters are in a box that Tanner's daughter keeps in her home in Georgia. She read them once, after her father died. Most of them are just ordinary, she said. 2 men writing about their lives, families, work, the weather, normal things. She paused. But the first letter my father sent, he wrote something at the end that I've thought about since. He said, I have spent a long time trying to understand why you did what you did. I think I have stopped trying to understand it, and just decided to be grateful for it. Franz Huber was released from the prisoner of war camp in 1946. He returned to Bavaria and became a schoolteacher. He taught for 31 years. He never spoke publicly about what happened in the ditch outside Kassel. He mentioned it once in a letter to Tanner in 1957. In a single sentence, I have always thought it was a simple thing, he wrote. There was a man. He needed help. I helped him. I do not know why this seems remarkable to people. Colonel Reed, who had been in the room during Patton's meeting with Huber, spoke about it many years later. He drove 2 hours to tell a 20-year-old German prisoner that what he had done was right. Reed said, that's what he did. No fanfare, no press. He just went. He paused. He said it would be in the record. And it is. Because I wrote it down when
we got back. I thought someone should.
Was Patton right to make that trip? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more stories about World War II and the people who lived it on both sides, make sure to subscribe.